I just really wanted to see how long it was going to go for.
I was trying to add to
Welcome,
the beat.
everybody, to this wonderful and weird introduction to this episode of Geek News and Reviews and Opinions for Saturday, June 4th, 2016. I am your host, Adam Mickelson. I hope everybody has had a wonderful weekend and week. Obviously, there is a new movie coming out, or that has come out. I don't know what people are thinking of it. I've avoided the reviews because we'll be taking care of it really soon. But for me, it's just been work, and more work, just trying to catch up with everything else that was going on. But thankfully, I get to have a break tonight, and we get to talk about some really out there stories, man. I tell you, this happened every stinking time I covered E3. Is like the 2 weeks before, that's when all the crap came out of the woodwork, and then we had to talk about porn. So, without further... at least one person's excited to talk about porn.
I'm sorry.
Well, when you think about it, Avenue Q put it best. What else is the internet for?
Porn. I get way more excited about talking about porn than I should on this show.
Especially on the air.
I don't know why.
One of these days, like when somebody actually approaches us for a T-shirt line, I'm going to go dig out a bunch of Aldo quotes, and those will be the T-shirts.
Listen, man. We don't talk about porn very often. So when we do, it's like a unicorn episode for me.
Okay, all right. So what you're basically saying is this is the equivalent of Abe Lincoln riding the T-Rex?
Sure.
Okay. Because that's the closest thing to unicorns that we've actually had on the show. So of course I am not alone in this wonderful evening. I am being joined by my panel of fellow geeks, fellow YouTubers, fellow critics, and fellow all-around good guys. And let's go ahead and get started with Aldo Gomez of Board Offline of Reviews versus the World. Aldo, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm doing good. I just finished, probably about an hour ago, I just finished watching the entirety of the first season of Durararara, or Durr. It's honestly, it's such an excellent show.
I'll admit, I like it.
It's really good. I'm really excited for the second season. But yeah, no, I mean.
Wait, this is your first time seeing it?
All the way through. I'd watched episodes here and there. Anyways, I've watched some episodes here and there, but I've never watched the whole thing in order. And this whole last week, I've just been watching the entirety of it in order as it should be. And oh my gosh, there's a payoff.
Yeah, I was actually gonna say, if you've watched the first season in order, yeah, you're gonna enjoy the living hell out of the second season.
It's really, I mean, the first half of the whole series, the first Celti arc, is really excellent on its own. Like you could end it halfway through and you'd be fine. But really, the rest of the first season is really just feels like this is your reward for watching the first half.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree with that.
Yeah, it just plays off of existing relationships and characters that you met, and it does the thing I really enjoy that Full Metal Alchemist does, where it is the show and the writers are fully aware of who knows what characters and what relationships exist and which ones don't. So the show plays a lot with that. And that's something I personally really enjoy a lot when shows go that little bit of an extra mile.
Well, then I'm looking forward to see what you actually think of the second season when you finish it. We are also being joined by the Shadow Blazer himself, coming out of the shadows once again to spotlight his love for Kaon and all things female protagonist. Alex, how are you doing this fine evening?
Well, my tagline is a bit of a double meaning because indeed I am here in the light and out of the shadows, but I also saw the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles out of the shadows today.
So what you're trying to tell us is that you're Finnish?
Yes.
Once you start a fight, you always finish it! That's the only yell I'm going to do tonight.
I don't think so.
Well, I have to actually... Aldo hasn't been here, so I actually have to not yell because I wake up baby, and then mommy kills me. So
That's right.
that's just what has to happen. I've had to contain my temper the last couple of episodes.
That's right, because you're a father now.
I know, right? And then we are also being joined by Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah of Romney's Reviews, From the Shelf, Romney's Reading Club, Visual Club, whatever the hell club it is this evening, because it changes from week to week. Romney, how are you doing this fine evening?
Doing pretty good. I mean, as many people could see on my channel, I got to go to 2 press screenings this week. Trying to get back into the swing of things now that my job allows me that time to jump through the numerous amounts of hoops you have to jump through in order to go to these screenings. Also, I think I've watched more anime in this week than I have the entirety of last year. I mean, there's other reasons why, but some I've been checking out, like Tekkaman Blade, Turna Gundam. One of the worst anime adaptations of a manga I've ever seen would have to be the Planets anime by Sunrise. And I'm tempted to turn that into an episode of From the Shelf, because never since The Devil Lady has an anime pissed me off so much. And as you can also see by my lower third, I did not kill Tweedledee because I've been going through The Wolf Among Us on Vita, and I got to that scene where you transform. I'm not going to explain too much, but that's like one of the choices you made, and I chose to show mercy.
So, with that said, we have our wonderful panel here, and we have plenty of stories to get into. So, let's go ahead and get into them. And first of all, as the panel have stated, we have at least 2 stories regarding porn tonight. And so let's just go ahead and get them out of the way, at least one of them. So, the first one involves... I just need to clarify this. So... usually the panel gets mad at me when I talk about Blizzard. Tonight, am I going to get that frustration this time?
Not really, because it actually talks about an issue that we can all relate to this time.
Okay,
And it's a game that people still care about and aren't dropping subscriptions for.
Yeah.
So at that point, it's actually regarding Overwatch. Now, I think a couple of weeks ago, we got some listener suggestions, as well as Alex tracked down a story about basically. This was similar to another story that we got where Pornhub was involved. I can't remember how, but
that was
this
when
case,
when Fallout 4 released, and they talked about how traffic dropped within the release of Fallout 4.
That's right. When Fallout 4 released, how their traffic went down by a great deal. This time around, however, a couple of weeks ago, they had to admit that traffic had gone up, specifically in the searches of, I believe it was Tracer Overwatch, Widowmaker Overwatch, Tracer Widowmaker Overwatch, basically anything involving those 2 characters, because you will get some, well, rather raunchy fan art from it.
As they say, Rule 34, if it exists, there is porn of it.
With Overwatch released and doing well, at least the reviews are saying it's doing well, we now have an initiative from Blizzard on trying to take care of all of this Overwatch porn. I don't know how they're going to try and take care of it, because for every one... I mean, can we just say that porn is like Hydra? Cut off one head and 2 more will take its place?
Yeah, except times that...
Also, people don't get angry when you tell them that Captain America is in porn, and they do when you tell them he's in Hydra.
That's true. That's true.
We did not talk about.
Yes, we didn't, but I mean, we will. We will at some point.
Like there is something to talk about. I don't. I think it's so below. People that don't read comics are complaining about the comics they don't read.
Yeah.
Well, but see, here's the thing: the people who are complaining about that were also the people complaining about the DC story a while back, where Superman recanted his U.S. citizenship.
Yeah,
and
or
didn't go deep into that story.
Once again, people who don't read comics are complaining about comics.
Yeah, it was worse. It was worse when the Life with Archie series killed Archie off at the end of the series, and people lost their frickin' minds. And I'm just like, hey, and as someone who actually follows some of these Archie comics, I'm just like, you're not reading it. Why the fuck do you suddenly care?
Exactly.
Yeah. So basically the story here is that Blizzard has gone on an aggressive campaign to remove all of the Overwatch-related porn, and we're talking everything. Imagery, apparently there are some YouTube videos here and there, or videos from other organizations, specifically, I guess, through Pornhub, that
Yeah.
they're trying to get rid of right now in order to protect the property.
Sort of. At least from what I researched on the article, it's not so much they're trying to get rid of all the porn. They're specifically trying to get rid of the ones made using Source Filmmaker, because that's when you get into a little bit of a legal gray area.
Well, yes. Sorry, just to expand on it, because you're not wrong. It's not necessarily Source Filmmaker. That is like the 90% thing, but there are people that are using other things. More explicitly, it's people who are ripping and using the in-game models.
Yes.
Typically, they use them through Source Filmmaker. There are other people who have more technical abilities, so they don't use Source Filmmaker. But yes, it is people using the in-game models. And a lot of that anger comes from the fact that a lot of those models were ripped from the beta version of the game. So this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with that, that's where you get into kind of an iffy gray area, because you have, well, if someone drew it, people aren't going to be as, like, annoyed with it. It's like, okay, well, that's just someone going out of the way to draw fan art. But when you're using actual in-game models, that's where it can get kind of iffy. Because I remember back when Telltale released their Game of Thrones game, people started ripping those models and began using it for porn like there was no tomorrow. And Telltale and HBO basically had to bring the hammer down.
The part that makes me laugh about this, because going into other stories, the main targets of these Source Filmmakers and also a lot of the porn imagery that you get up on like Google Images is, again, it's Tracer and Widowmaker. But here's the thing too: if you go in, like, if you just do a general search of Overwatch, there's probably just as much imagery of the other female characters. I would say the only one that probably doesn't is maybe Mercy and Zarya.
Oh no,
there's diva porn.
No,
it exists.
It's quite a bit. No,
there's a website that's consolidated all of it, and so you can literally search by character.
Yeah. So the reason why you see a lot of Noir and Tracer stuff, there's several factors. One, Noir had the pre-order skin, which has been heavily marketed. Well, not anymore, right? But because the game's out, so you can't pre-order it.
Although your mic has gone really weird. You're kind of distant.
Your mother has gone weird, and she's distant.
Well, that's true, but go on.
Anyways, so part of the reason why Noir and Mercy are the two more popular ones, Noir had the pre-order bonus skin, and Tracer had a lot of that butt controversy.
Yes, she had the butt pose.
Yeah, so when you tell people you can't have this, then they find a way to have it, and then some. And on top of that, their animated short, because you remember how there were like 4 animated shorts.
Yeah.
One of them starred those two specifically.
Yes.
So just
and I know one of the images is actually ripped directly from the cinematic.
Yeah. So Blizzard just accidentally throwing gas on the flame.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I don't think they've figured that part out.
It's a very sexy flame.
Yeah. It's one of those things I've started to see them fix in a lot of their properties, is like, oh, wait, we forgot to change that model of that one female character who's still basically wearing nothing. And now they're going through these initiatives to slowly clothe them so that they have credibility. So, Alex, your thoughts on the aggressive initiative to remove the porn?
Well, obviously, Blizzard has the right to do it, but I say, Blizzard, you're fighting a losing battle.
You really are.
So, it's like we keep saying throughout this segment of the show here, the internet is for porn, Rule 34 exists.
The sad part is like, I mean, do a search of any Blizzard character, like Blizzard female character, you will bring up at least something. So that's the sad part here. So in essence, that's why my argument is this is like Hydra. You cut off one head and 2 more will take its place. Because that's just what's going to happen. I mean, if it's not going to be about the actual characters, like in imagery, it's going to be about the cosplayers, because that's already happening. I don't know how many times, like, Blizzard or BlizzCon imagery or BlizzCon pictures of the cosplayers that go up for the costume contest are done in really horrible angles so that you can maybe see something. So that's just something that happens. So final thoughts before we get to the other half of the Overwatch debacle here. At least I'm going to call it the debacle.
I think the only real way to end it is that we have Rule 34, but there's also Rule 35, where if it doesn't exist, it will be made.
This is true. This is really true.
It's awesome.
So the other half of the Blizzard story this week is that this is actually an initiative that's been going on ever since Overwatch's release, which was Blizzard came out fairly clear. I believe it was Jeff Kaplan that did an interview at least 2 weeks before Overwatch's release, saying that they were going to be doing an aggressive initiative against cheaters. They didn't want cheaters in Overwatch, and that they were going to. I don't think he used the word ban, but he was basically alluding to like a permaban penalty if you cheated in Overwatch. And, well, Blizzard made good on their threat. There are literally thousands of people that are getting banned for using Overwatch. I don't remember the actual name of the software, but it allows for you to cheat in Overwatch. And they got permabanned so hard, in fact, that if you bought the game again, in some cases, you were still perma-banned. Now, I'm all for banning cheaters. I'm all for doing that, especially if the creators come out and say, we don't want you cheating. But I've always thought that an adequate penalty for cheating is to basically make them buy the game again. And I guess that the way that they're doing this is through the actual internet, not the internet service provider, but the service address. So at that point, if you're still logging into Overwatch under that service address, you get banned again after you just paid $60 again. I don't know if this is because going back and forth with Blizzard, I don't know if this is an initiative that they're trying to fix, but yeah, it's happening. We have thousands of people being banned from cheating on Overwatch. So, and I want to say, because I don't even think the story that you submitted, although actually says that they're trying to fix that whole, you bought the game again and you still...
I don't think that's particularly one of their worries.
Yeah, because right now I think they are just looking to bust cheaters, and that's really all they're worried about.
I think, honestly, they're from what it looks like, they're not even interested in giving people a second chance. And I don't blame them. Because a lot of people are either too soft on banning, or in this case, too hard on banning. And you know what? A happy medium doesn't really exist. So,
which is funny because Blizzard has put the ban hammer down on WoW players, on Diablo players. They've done plenty, and they've always been lashed out at as saying the penalty was too harsh. I still remember the whole problem that happened with a WoW progression raid team that used an exploit they didn't even realize they were using on progression content and received a 72-hour ban, and the community lashed out at Blizzard and said that was too much. Or no, it wasn't a 72-hour ban, I don't think. It was an entire week ban, so they would miss out on progression the following week.
Right.
So at that point, everybody went, "Oh, Blizzard, that's too harsh."
But at the same time, this isn't the same thing as WoW. This isn't like WoW is a subscription base, so just essentially taking time away from time that you've bought from is a pretty big punishment. But this is a one-time purchase thing, and it's also a game that's trying to go way more competitive than WoW really is. I mean, I'm not saying WoW isn't competitive, because it does have its competitive aspects, but it's not a game where you jump in to be competitive right off the. Overwatch is, I mean, even though it doesn't have the competitive mode, it will soon. So I'm guessing that's kind of their way of also saying we want everybody to be in the competitive mode without being afraid of the fact that this is
their initiative. Is like they've said honestly that they're literally treating this like they do StarCraft with the esports and all of that, like trying to keep things balanced and out and keep the cheaters out. Same thing for Hearthstone, same thing for Heroes of the Storm. This is their exact same initiatives for all of those esports competitive games. And they've even admitted they want Overwatch as a competitive esport. Yep. So at that point, this is just something that they're going to have to do. Does it suck? Yeah, for some, but don't cheat.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you consider that ban evasion is still very much a thing where if someone gets banned, they'll try coming in under a different IP address. I mean, just look at the kind of people that get banned from sites like TV Tropes or Wikipedia that try latching onto a different IP address in order to try to evade the ban. It is very much an issue, and I'm thinking in Blizzard's case, since a lot of it is online based and online focused, that's probably just their way of mitigating, of trying to prevent people from evading the ban hammer by simply buying the game again, especially if they're going to be playing online or playing competitively.
Yeah, exactly. They don't want the padded numbers or having the cheated numbers, so to speak, with that. Alex, you've been kind of quiet on this. Do you think that Blizzard is in the wrong for their excessive banning of cheaters, or are they in the right?
Yeah, they're in the right. There's not much more to say. It's like you guys have said, don't cheat. If you don't cheat, then you don't have a reason to worry about getting banned. I'm sure Blizzard has safeguards to protect those who might be given exploits accidentally, or people who might stumble upon a bug. But people who willingly abuse the system, then yeah, just ban them and throw the ban hammer down and kick them out permanently.
There is also that cute little thing called like the terms and conditions.
Terms of service, yeah.
Yeah, that you agree to whenever you download Battle.net or any game. That's probably in there. So
it's a funny thing that actually encompasses all of their games.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is why you read the EULA.
Must avoid urge to talk about other games. Okay, good. But that's pretty much Blizzard's initiative. They're trying to get rid of the porn, and they're trying to get rid of the cheaters. That's pretty even, I think.
So basically, they're trying to get rid of the cheaters and the beaters. Hi-yo!
Romney.
He said it because I wouldn't.
You may have just come up with the title for this episode. And yes, I'm actually surprised that that didn't come from Aldo. It came from you.
Well, I knew somebody was going to say it. That's the thing. You got to jump on it.
I guess at this point, do I need to have a talk with Aldo later about him not wanting to sue you for stealing his spotlight?
Well, that's the thing. It's not like Aldo made the joke ahead. I mean, I'm not Carlos Mencina here, people.
But I'm just saying, man. That's exactly that. We would expect this from Aldo. Let's go ahead and move to the next story because we've still got porn to get rid of.
Speaking of porn
to empty out of our hard drives. So a listener actually suggested this. I can't even believe I'm talking about this, but it's happening. So people might know that 2 weeks from now, E3 is happening. And I'm already mad at E3 because they're having that funky schedule again like they did last year where they're going to start some conferences on Sunday, which means I'm going to get no rest pretty much the entire week. And it just so happens that they've opened up a new area for E3, and that would be for the people creating virtual reality porn.
More specifically, it's a company that's making it.
So specifically, it's the company called Naughty America. Can I make the Courage the Cowardly Dog joke now? Can I? Naughty. So Naughty America will demo and showcase the latest in adult VR content. Whew. Somehow
Welcome
I have
to the
a feeling
future,
there's going
everyone.
to be a line for this.
Or there might not. It might backfire where people are too ashamed to actually get in line.
I don't know, man. There's people getting together, and I don't think.
Something tells me Angry Joe at the very least is going to go try it out.
I think most of the
Nothing against Joe, but I mean, Joe tries everything at E3. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble now for saying that. I love Joe, but Joe tries everything. So at that point, it's just be like, well, I've got to check this off the list.
Why do I get the feeling the booth is going to be playing the John Farr song "Naughty Naughty"? Just as people walk up, I'm probably the only one who's ever heard that song, unfortunately.
I have a feeling a lot of things are going to be happening. I actually love the fact that when I saw this story come out, a couple of my friends actually responded to me and said, "Gee, I wonder what the booth babes are going to look like." Well, I don't think they're coming out naked, if that's what you're asking.
No, that'll probably be it. Where there probably won't be booth babes unless you put the goggles on.
That's pretty much it. That's how it's going to go. Booth representatives will be discussing how gamers utilize VR headsets for adult content. And apparently Naughty America actually has its own $20 VR headset for this content. Wow. So if you don't have an Oculus Rift, it's okay. They'll provide you with what you need.
It's probably more like this Google Cardboard, because this averages about $20 for a pre-made one, and so it's probably more something like this. I mean, cardboard that you just put your phone in. Don't expect like an Oculus Rift or like the huge Samsung thing, unless you're looking to pay like $250 at least.
The sad part is that apparently, so with the PC gaming show on E3, they actually were going to do a specific focus on Oculus. And apparently, it wasn't this company specifically, but another that actually did get mad that this stuff wasn't going to get highlighted on that. Gee, I wonder why it isn't going to get highlighted. It's almost like there's adult content in there.
I guess it'd be more blacklighted, really.
Ooh, don't take out the black light. Don't do it. You don't want to know what's been in there. So let's just go down the panel. Aldo, your thoughts on porn finally reaching out to E3?
I think it's, I think it's only natural. I mean, I don't want to hit the stereotypes, but I'm pretty sure that's already their biggest market.
Mm-hmm.
Just you know,
there's already 3 websites.
There's a reason stereotypes exist.
Yep. It's one of those things where it's hard to say that they don't have a place there, because they do. I mean, this is just as much a showcase for them as it is anybody else. And if the Oculus is going to be there, and if the Google equivalent and Microsoft HoloLens are going to be there, then they have a right to be there as well. I also find it interesting. I think it was either Aldo or Romney that brought this up, that there was an esports team sponsored by YouPorn. And I love the fact that at the very end of this story, it actually does say that the ESL recently banned that esports team.
Yeah, we talked about this, I think.
Well, that they were still that they existed, but I don't think we talked about them being banned.
Oh.
So, yeah, Alex, your thoughts on porn being at E3?
Clearly, there's a market for it, so why the hell not? I'm sure some journalists are going to have a lot of fun in their off time.
At the very least, yeah. I have a feeling I know at least like 5 channels that are going to go there, and they're going to have to do something in front of this thing. Do you want to know what would be really sad? It's not going to happen, but you know, this would be like the perfect time to bring out Nathan Barnett and have him with his Virtual Boy on and just enjoying whatever he's watching on there. But unfortunately, he got banned from E3, so can't do that. Romney, your thoughts on porn coming to E3?
All I can say is I feel sorry for the custodial staff that's working in the convention hall in that particular area, because they're probably going to get some extra work. I mean, I can't be the only one thinking it. I mean, they're going to need more air fresheners. They're going to need some stronger mops, some stronger detergent. You know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen.
What's going to happen is any staffer that runs that booth is going to become obsessive compulsive, because they are never going to stop washing their hands after that.
Or look at
never going to happen
the same way again.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, it makes sense. I mean, sadly or fortunately, depending on which camp you come from, there is a market for it. It is a need that is being fulfilled, and really, it's the future. It's better to embrace it rather than fight against it vehemently, like people have had with every single thing in the course of human history.
Well, it's one of those things where, at least in my opinion, I mean, Oculus Rift opened the door. This is just as much in that market as anything else, and frankly, the door was open years ago when we actually did have like Leisure Suit Larry games making their way onto to Sony press floors, not the press conferences, but they were actually being demoed on PlayStation 3s at the time. So, I mean, there is a market for it, and
especially when you consider there's already in researching this, I found that there are 3 paid subscription sites specifically for virtual reality headsets, and so the market is there. What innovations are being made? I can see why someone would want to advertise those sorts of things, because, well, there's gold in them hills.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, like, if you want to remove them, or if you want to say that they don't have a right to be there, then, well, Oculus doesn't have a right to be there. HoloLens doesn't, because they have just as much a right as Nintendo just as much as Capcom, anybody. This is a viable market that people can actually advertise to.
Yeah, it's pretty much, you can't, I mean, you can create the tool, but you can't control how people use it, whether it's used for evil or for good or whatever. It's kind of a case of, it's a tool, people will use it however they wish, and you just can't control it.
Pretty much. So final thoughts before we move on to the next sticky situation that we're going to be talking about tonight.
This is why I love these episodes.
Yeah, well, this one's sticky for a different reason, where, well, this one would probably be sticky from sweat and saliva from people yelling and shouting.
From SJWs, basically.
SJWs, people countering said SJWs. There's got to be some blood as well thrown in there.
Well, yeah, obviously, because, you know, the first person that's going to preach nonviolence and then go the absolute opposite is probably the SJWs in some cases. So let's go ahead and get into the next story here, which is something that I mean, the story that we have is from ABC News, but a lot of major outlets have been talking about this, and it's concerning. So major companies like Facebook, YouTube, Microsoft, and Twitter are announcing, or at least announcing the initiative that they want to create, at the very least, algorithms, kind of like Content ID, that would crack down on, quote, hate speech.
Hold on, guys. I gotta get stuff going in the back. Be right back.
Okay. So Aldo will be back, and then we will have tons of hate speech things to talk to him about.
Yeah.
Everybody get your hate speech ready. So this story has frustrated me because of all of the articles that I've tried to read on it, which is basically, I love the fact that they want to say, yes, we want to do this, we want to curb hate speech, but then they don't really define what hate speech is, and therefore, if you put in one obviously concerning company here is YouTube. Because YouTube already has an algorithm, it's called Content ID, and it already is a problem for its current content creators. What would happen if we bring in a hate speech finder to basically, I'm guessing, bleep you at the very least, ban your video at the very worst, should you actually use that language? So basically, Angry Joe, Angry Video Game Nerd, Nostalgia Critic, Alpha Omega Sin, are there any others? JonTron would be just outright out of the job if this actually goes through, roughly. And look, people will remember a couple of weeks ago I had a very similar complaint about people launching, quote, hate speech at me. But here's the difference, though. They had a right to be able to do that just as much as I had a right to be able to say, F you, I'm moving on, kind of thing. And so I tend to be more on the side of I do not want a computer, I do not want an algorithm looking for, quote, hate speech.
Well,
because for all I know, this episode will be banned because I just said doo-doo head.
Yeah, looking at this, though, it doesn't look like all these websites are going to be doing an automated system. Some are actually going to have an actual review process. And one detail people are kind of forgetting, that this is part of a European Commission Code of Conduct. So this is something that is being impressed on these websites by the European Union. This is not something happening that's because of anything in the U.S. This is specifically the European Union, which has different laws and legislations regarding internet, since in Europe it's treated as a public utility, and so that's something that the European Union is imposing on a lot of these companies, and these companies are obliging because they don't want to lose that business.
Yeah.
And it's also, the spin people are giving it is that, oh, it's censoring hate speech, but looking at a lot of these quotes, the main thing they're trying to target is, well, extremist posts, because, well, much as a lot of people don't like to acknowledge, organizations like ISIS have been using social media to recruit members.
Oh, sure.
That seems to be the main impetus behind this resolution, is to try to root out any of the social networking accounts that are trying to incite violence, such as trying to get people to join ISIS, or even various militant groups of various religions. There's quite a few.
Necessarily limited to ISIS. There are many, many, many organizations that are using social media to try and recruit new members. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, they're basically trying to cut this off at the source, roughly. And the only reason I bring in I interject my own opinion into this, Romney, is that, well, let's just say for the sake of argument this gets successful, then we're going to have local people looking into possibly doing this. And when I hear things like algorithms, I immediately go towards the whole Skynet answer, which is basically humanity is not worth living, and let's just unleash the Terminators, because that's what's going to happen. It's already happening technically with Content ID. As soon as something, I mean, I was literally laughing my butt off this week. I was scheduling all of the uploads for this week for all of the channels that I do stuff with. And literally 5 seconds after I uploaded something, it wasn't even released yet. It's scheduled to come out later this week, and it already has a Content ID flag. It isn't even out
but
yet.
I think that's separate from with the trying to crack down on hate speech, because one thing that a lot of people tend to forget whenever they cite things like freedom of speech is that they tend to forget that freedom of speech, at least as defined here in the United States, just means that the government can't go after you for what you say. Now, keep in mind, that means the government, as in any government body, can't censor what you say. But a lot of these companies are private companies, and as much as we all hate to admit it, they can pretty much do whatever the hell they want.
They can. And here's the thing too, like you said, a lot of them are looking towards an algorithm, but a portion of them are also looking towards like actual boards, like having, you know, I think the most I actually heard was like a board of like 3 or 4 people actually reviewing these things on a case-by-case basis, which technically, at least in my opinion, is how that should go, because then at that point, I think you would be you'd hit the target that you're trying to hit on that one. If you algorithm it, then unfortunately you're going to have problems up the wazoo. Just from the first day.
Yeah, especially when you consider the fact that the whole goal of this is to try to quash this hate speech before it has the chance to go viral. And that is the big thing that they're trying to do here, is trying to stop anything really hateful that could incite violence from reaching millions upon millions of people. It's, like you said, they're trying to stop it at the source. They're basically trying to crush it before it gets too big to take down.
Yes, and this is one of those cases where I trust a human being better than I do trust a computer to be able to do that. I think a board would be easier, and you would nail the targets that you need to nail. Yeah,
looking at the article here, the only company listed that explains, that basically says that they were trying to put in algorithms would be Twitter. And that's where it can be kind of tricky, but at the same time, with something like Twitter, where you're only allowed to post so many characters, the automated system might not be as easy to abuse in that particular case, because you can only say so much in a tweet. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. There are still going to be problems, and people are still going to try to exploit it. But with something like a tweet, that's not something that you can really stop, because, I mean, if you take down one tweet, they'll just tweet it again and again and again. And if you take down the account, there's Google Cache, people take screenshots. We've seen a lot of stuff like that happen in the past where people have tried to stop certain tweets from spreading, and it's only made it worse. So there's got to be a human element in there in some capacity, because I think a lot of people are seeing YouTube and they realize, okay, that's obviously not working.
I mean, that's what we've been saying with YouTube as well, is that there needs to be a human element in there. It just can't be this algorithm. Alex, your thoughts on this whole situation?
Well, I mean, I've read through this article a couple of times. I probably haven't gone out and done quite the research you have, and yeah, to avoid the knee-jerk reaction, I don't want to hit the panic button just yet, but I'd say it is a little mildly concerning. I mean, there are some decent, noble intentions behind it by trying to curb extremist groups from recruiting, like ISIS and the likes, and probably trying to just curb even the more extreme inflammatory rhetoric that might incite true violence here, right? But I really do hope this doesn't delve into the point where, oh, this person called me some names. That person hates speech, right? And I'm talking like just what we've seen lately with a lot of the banter back and forth between I can't name any specific examples, but okay, maybe like the Ghostbusters examples right now, where
Yeah, I mean, like the Ghostbusters movie, criticize Donald Trump in some way, and look at the language that gets thrown at you. You know.
right, and maybe if someone's gonna use a little salty language, a little profanity, when it's not particularly aimed at anybody, I feel like who cares? That shouldn't be such a big deal. Words are words at times, right? There's the difference between saying, well, fuck you and go kill yourself, I guess. But ultimately, it is sort of, we have to kind of closely watch and see how this is implemented, and if it starts to become out of control, that's when it's time to, well, take your business elsewhere, because as we mentioned, these are private entities, and that's what we got to do. We got to let them know with our dollars, with our views, with our traffic, everything that we don't like it. A hashtag saying I stand with hate speech, which was trending a few days ago, not really going to help you, not going to help the cause.
Well, but this entire story is kind of a sticky situation. Like, to step out the way that we are and saying that this is a potentially bad situation that could brew into a worse one. Unfortunately, the SJWs would come out against us and say, well, then you're for hate speech. You're one of those horrible trolls that leads all the go kill yourself stuff. And that's not the case. I mean, we don't do that. I can vouch for at least all three of the members on this panel that we don't do that. But at the same time, I don't like those people either. But they have a right to be able to say that, even though I wish that they wouldn't. Unfortunately, it's just one of those common sense arguments. Instead, I would much rather not give them the light of day. In fact, ignore their pleas for inflammation in that community, and just basically force them to not force them, but show them that we're not incensed by their words anymore, roughly. And I know that what I'm actually saying is a really hard thing to make happen, especially since some trolls are very persistent, but that's where like a personal panel could come into play and say, well, this person's been saying this stuff for who knows how many months. Maybe we should actually look into banning the guy. And
as far as panels go, which is definitely a whole lot better than an automated system, one thing I gotta say, one piece of advice is just make it transparent. Let us know who's sitting on these panels. Let them be at least able to contact if there's a complaint of some sort, something's not working, or we think that there's a false flag, and don't make it sound like there's going to be scary repercussions like YouTube does when you try to file a counterclaim. And
that's definitely something to consider, because as much as we're saying that it could be a positive thing to put a panel in place and have people running this, well, people are equally as corruptible as an algorithm is.
Yes.
So at that point, you could easily have the opposite happen.
Yeah, so I think then it'd also be ideal to rotate these panels in and out periodically, have other people come in every so often at for different lengths, different periods. I don't know, for like 6 months, like these three people can serve. Then 6 months later, you appoint 3 new people.
Yeah, something to that extent, but I don't know. We would have to get into the details. First of all, this is happening in the EU, so we'd have to wait and see how they utilize it, and then at that point we start having the debate here. Because, I mean, here's the bottom line: if they don't utilize it properly, we're not going to have to see it, because they're going to be trying to get rid of it. So, Romney, you've been fairly quiet on the matter. Is there anything else you want to add?
Not entirely. I think we pretty much hit it on the head where, okay. I mean, we understand that we can't, it's very much a difficult thing where, yeah, on the one hand, it could be very easily to be exploit that sort of thing, but on the other hand, you obviously want to stop things like extremists and militants from inciting violence, and so it's not an easy issue to address, and it's not a polarized binary issue as some people would like to argue, saying you're either for or against. It's very much something that has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And you can't. It's basically like you can't just do a blanket action to address everything, because that's not how the world works. It's not black. It's not white. There's just a whole lot of gray.
Well, then at that point, let's just go ahead and wrap up this story. So, we're actually going to interject a story here because when I made this agenda, the story hadn't happened yet. And frankly, we did get some listeners that wanted us to talk about it. And in fact, one of our panelists wanted us to talk about it. But unfortunately, Aldo is having some construction issues outside his house. So unfortunately, we will not be able to get him tonight. But this literally broke midnight this morning. Because I remember it just barely broke, and I had to go to bed before I could do any homework on it, which is, unfortunately, that famed boxer and icon as far as, because he's done some media work here and there, Muhammad Ali unfortunately passed away last night due to septic shock. He was dealing with a respiratory illness that unfortunately just went south really dang quick, and unfortunately died, I believe, at like 12:30, something like that, at the age of 74. Now, a lot of people will probably sit there and go, well, this is a geek podcast, why are you talking about a boxer? Well, here's the thing, is that geekdom is very all-encompassing. It doesn't necessarily need to be just games. It doesn't need to just be entertainment. And I mean, here's the thing: Muhammad Ali has contributed to some degree of entertainment. So at that point, this is a big moment. I mean, I'm the old fart on the podcast, but I know who Muhammad Ali is, and I know what he did in his life. If for any other reason I want to make the wisecrack that he pretty much made George Foreman's career for him, because they kept on doing their little spats, but. Yeah, he's a big name in culture at this point, and so it's hard not to at least interject this, even though a majority of the panel don't follow boxing and don't follow probably any of the other contributions that he's had. At least I would think so. I didn't follow boxing, but I knew who he is. And I think Romney's having issues right now with his video feed. But Alex, your thoughts on Muhammad Ali passing away?
Well, it's just unfortunate. I don't really follow boxing. I don't follow many professional sports at all. So, I mean, the most I knew about Muhammad Ali was, yeah, he was a boxer. That's kind of about it. I think I knew... I believe he's the one who coined the catchphrase "float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." You know, so, and I know the big term.
I'm so smooth, I float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Yep.
Right, and the big Thrilla in Manila fight. That's really about it. I don't know a tremendous amount about Ali. Didn't he also serve as an inspiration for like one of Rocky's opponents in one of the Rocky films?
I'm sure he did.
He might have.
I wouldn't be surprised if he did.
Yeah, I want to say Clubber Lane. Well, I think that's the one. Yeah, Clubber Lane by Mr. T was inspired by Ali.
Could have been. The only thing that I know of, like media-wise, aside from his contributions again to pro wrestling, because well, he was a major celebrity that they brought in, was the Ali biopic that was done where Will Smith played him. So a lot of my information kind of comes from that, where I know that he had major rivalries with George Foreman and one other, I can't remember his name, and also the actual name he had before Muhammad Ali, which was Cassius Clay. And so yeah, he might have been the inspiration for Clubber Lang, because I wouldn't be surprised if at least Cassius Clay was, because at least from what I understand, Cassius and Muhammad were different kind of personalities, but different kinds of beliefs were put into place at that point. And what's also kind of difficult to admit is, like, Muhammad did have, like, Ali did have some other media contributions, but unfortunately in the later end of his life where he was dealing with things like Parkinson's. I know that, I believe he at least did some things with the organization Michael J. Fox worked with. There also was the whole '96 Olympics where he came out and, you know, was kind of shaky when he lit the torch. But, I mean, I hate to kind of emphasize this again. There's a reason that he's kind of part of this, is because he's he's a prominent figure in sporting events. In fact, I actually talked to one of our buddies who runs a sporting podcast or a sports podcast to see if he wanted to come in tonight just to show us all of the accomplishments Muhammad Ali had throughout his life. But it was last minute. Romney, are you stable at this point to be able to give an opinion?
Testing,
Or
testing. Can anybody hear me?
we can
Just
hear you,
barely.
we just can't see you.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
That's better.
Okay, I had to switch to my Bluetooth headphones in order to get it to work, but I kept trying to chime in, but noticed I wasn't getting a response, so you just got to do what you got. As a geek, I'm well aware of the legacy that Muhammad Ali has left on the world of sports in a lot of various capacities, and so I acknowledge that he was a very important figure, a very controversial figure, especially in regards to his involvement with people like Malcolm X, but his legacy is obviously something that can't be denied or diminished because he was very much important in the world of boxing, especially when you look at the fact that they even had a cartoon based on Muhammad Ali. There was the comic where he fought Superman, and so
He had
was
a
a very
Scooby-Doo
large...
thing too, didn't he? He was one of the people that got brought into Scooby-Doo, I think.
I wouldn't doubt it, to be honest, because that's just how media worked back then. So really, it's a shame.
And your camera's lagging out again.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to switch to audio only if this is gonna continue. So you're just gonna have to deal with the face of a sushi chef. So
It's okay, everybody.
yeah. So base game that.
Oh,
Wow, you're cutting out on
and now the mic's cutting out again. Okay, well, so I'll just go ahead and skip to my thoughts while Romney kind of fixes that. I am sad to hear about Muhammad Ali's passing, especially, but at the same time, I'm also very happy that he was able to get the years that he could. I mean, he died at 74. I've actually heard of stories where boxers died kind of in their prime. They died in their 30s, their 40s, due to the injuries that you can suffer in the ring. So at that point, I'm glad that this wasn't Muhammad Ali's fate. And so at that point, I can say he will be missed to fellow sports fans. I at least like the biopic that I got out of it, and I got to learn a lot about Muhammad Ali, but that's pretty much it. He will be missed. I know that we'll probably be talking about it on another podcast at some point. But yeah, that's pretty much all I can add to this unfortunate event that happened. And no, I'm not upping the Prozac budget because it sounds to me like it isn't necessary at this point. We're all sad, but we wish the family nothing but the best. So with that, that's kind of our nice little segue into our entertainment portion of this evening. And whoo boy, our entertainment portion has some controversy in it as well. First of all, it's apparent that the Ghostbusters movie coming out next month just won't leave people alone, as Dan Aykroyd has now come out and made some statements that he believes it's, quote, funnier and scarier than the original. So I believe he was brought in for was it a full screening of what they had at that point? Do people know?
Pull up the article.
Yeah, so Dan was brought onto the set to be able to see what they were doing with the new Ghostbusters film, obviously because they wanted to see what the original cast would think of the humor that they were going for, the atmosphere that they're going for this one, and obviously... Oh, wait, so I was wondering about Ernie Hudson, but this article actually answers that. So apparently also there's been some controversy around it. I believe it's Sony that's creating an issue with Bill Murray in the fact that he is doing a cameo in it, and if he refuses, then Sony will sue him.
Mm-hmm.
And Ernie Hudson actually tweeted some disparaging remarks about the remake, but has since deleted the tweets. So then we have Dan come out basically to try and save this and try to save face and say that at least this is funnier and scarier than the original vision that he had with Harold Ramis. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, and I also find it interesting that they've man, this movie has gotten so much advertisement. And just because I just barely heard about I think it was a Jimmy Kimmel event where they brought on both the old and the new cast to be able to talk about it. And so now it's really that they're trying to get all of the negative hype off of this movie so that people will go and see it. Alex, your thoughts on Dan Aykroyd's statements?
For Pete's sake, I could care less that Dan Aykroyd likes it. I don't know. Maybe he legitimately likes it. Maybe he's just trying to save face because he's probably getting kickbacks because it is technically partially his property. Obviously, I don't know the details of the original contract they made back in the 80s of how much he retains. But if you go through some of the Sony emails that were leaked from the big leaks from the hacks a while back, Dan, Ivan, Harold Ramis's estate were all at least in negotiations for some percentage of profits for this film. So, frankly, I don't really care. And at the end of the day, if he likes it, he likes it. I mean, Dan Aykroyd, well, the man I can't say has made a really good movie since probably the late 80s anyway. And at the same time, it's like sometimes a creator endorsement is wonderful and great because sometimes but other times it's just like, well, what's the big deal?
Some cases it's just outright meaningless.
Yeah, because I mean,
it doesn't do anything.
If you want an example of weird creator endorsements, well, Shigeru Miyamoto really likes the Super Mario Brothers movie, the live-action one. He thought it was good, but most people would. Miyamoto.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he liked it. He liked the movie.
Oh, that makes me kind of sad. Romney, are you back?
Shoot.
I don't think he is yet. We'll figure it out. And actually, here is the quote from Dan Aykroyd on the matter. So he says, as originator of the original, saw a test screening of new movie. Apart from brilliant, wow, brilliant. That's a strong word to pull out there, Dan. Genuine performances from the cast, both female and male. It has more laughs and more scares than the first two films. Plus, Bill Murray is in it. Well, Bill Murray's in a lot of movies. That doesn't necessarily sell it for me. Bill Murray was in Osmosis Jones. So, as one of the millions of Man fans and Ray Stantz, I'm paying to see that. And bringing all my friends. Okay, well, that's great and all, Dan, but that's your call.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that doesn't mean that anybody who speaks negatively about it is in the wrong. I hate to go back to the whole James Rolfe story, but James has a right to be able to say, I'm not going to go see it. Alex, you're not seeing it. Dan hasn't convinced you.
Pretty much. I tell you what, you go. We'll do split reviews again, like when we had Captain America Civil War, and you went and saw that and did your own review. Well, okay, you go do a solo review for Ghostbusters. I'll do a solo review for the next Transformers. We'll all make up our own shit in the end, right?
Was it Civil War? No, it was Winter Soldier that I did.
Winter Soldier, not Civil War. Duh.
You were right. I was like, dude, we just barely came out with that video, man.
Winter Soldier.
I find it funny that this has basically become the Dragon Shadow podcast because we're trying to help out Romney with his issues. So at that point, my thoughts are very simple on this one. I get that and here's the thing. I'm not going to hold this against Dan. If Dan wants to come out and say these things, Dan can come out and say these things. That's not a problem as far as I'm concerned. Does it convince me to spend money on this thing? Not really. I've already kind of made my own arrangements to be able to go see it at the very least because my siblings want to go see it. So I'll go see it with them because, well, we want this to be as good as the original Ghostbusters. And, well, we're just also looking for a reason to spend time with each other. There's also a possibility that me and Romney will get together for kind of a group review on Ghostbusters to see whether or not it actually holds up, whether or not it's good or bad. And that's the interesting concept with that review is Romney, I think, has seen the first two movies, at least to some extent, but he didn't grow up with them like, say, I did. So at that point, you have that contrast. So, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But at the same time, Dan, I love you dearly. This does not convince me to go see this movie.
It doesn't do anything for me either. You know, Dan, you're a little touched as far as I'm concerned because I still think the movie looks like garbage. But if anybody really wants to learn about some of the really shady behind the scenes stories of just what what it's taken to get this movie made, I would suggest go to Midnight Edge's channel. They have it's Midnight apostrophe S Edge channel. Go watch their little sort of multi-part mini documentary on the making of this film. There's some really shady shit got done by Sony just to get this movie made, and considering all that's happened, it doesn't surprise me.
I'm surprised about the whole thing that if Bill, because I was saying this before we went on the air, Bill is being threatened with being sued.
That's right.
He has to cameo in this movie or he will be sued.
Yeah.
That's good. You're going to get an Oscar-winning performance out of Bill Murray for that one, aren't you?
Jeez, that's why I said go watch the videos that from Midnight Edge, Midnight's Edge. That's how I should say it, Midnight's Edge, because they really go a lot deeper into this than I can right now on this show because we are multi-segments and we're on a schedule. So go watch those videos, or you can go to WikiLeaks and go pour through all the 24 emails about this. And there's a lot of stuff that just says, Sony, you really are some creeps.
Yeah. I can already tell you I'm just worried about this movie because of all of the stuff that we're hearing in the latter end of it. In fact, one of the things I can pretty much guarantee you is, being sued or not, if this movie bombs, what do you think is going to stop Bill Murray from ripping it a new one at that point? And justifiably so.
And I think Ivan Reitman and Ernie Hudson will probably come out. They've been fairly quiet throughout this whole thing. Yeah. Even though Reitman's a producer, I'm suspecting it's basically a in-name-only credit because it sounds like Amy Pascal really wrangled it away from his control.
I'm going to cut you off really quick. Romney, are you there?
I'm calling out to the ether. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, but kind of like it as a phone call.
You're coming in. Rodney, have you gone back to World War II?
Not quite. I'm having to use my Bluetooth headset, and I'm trying to use little bandwidth as possible because my modem crapped out, had to power cycle it, so I'm gonna try to basically keep calm and carry on, but
it's all right. It's all right. So, wow, I did not sacrifice a gnome goat this episode, did I? Wow.
Well, get out the knives.
We have Aldo having problems. We have Romney having problems. I'm kind of having problems. This is just going to be pretty nasty. The other thing I also want to point out is, like, with the Aykroyd comment, brilliant is a really strong word, and frankly makes me question whether or not he's getting a royalty out of it. He may not be getting a royalty out of it, but it does make me ask the question.
I suspect he's getting royalties out of it. He's got to be getting kickbacks for this.
He has a vested interest since it's still very much his baby. He's still making money off of it, so of course it's in his best interest for this film to do well.
Yep. So let's get to final thoughts here. Obviously, Romney, you have not been able to interject any thoughts on this just due to your internet issues. Does Dan Aykroyd's thoughts on this inspire you, or does it not do anything for you, or does it make you actually say, I don't want to go see it?
Honestly, my opinion hasn't really changed. I mean, I'm still willing to give the film a chance, but given Dan Aykroyd is coming out and saying, oh yeah, that's good, this is the same guy who also made sure that Blues Brothers 2000 got made, so yeah, it's pretty much a case of, I mean, if he likes it, cool, but not something to really base a whole bunch of decisions on. I mean, I'm still going to give the film a chance. I'm still going to review it. It's just Dan Aykroyd's comments doesn't really sway my opinion either way.
No, and in fact, so could you clarify that really quick? So I brought up the possibility of you and me getting together for a review. Have you seen the Ghostbusters movies? Or because I think you said you'd seen them, but later on, you didn't grow up with them.
I didn't really grow up with them. I saw the cartoon done by the Klein studio that basically was doing a bunch of cartoons during the 90s, and that was about it. And I've seen bits and pieces of the films, but I haven't actually seen the films in their entirety.
Okay, so then at that point, it's going to be like, I've seen the films, you haven't seen the films, and whether or not this holds up. So, okay, that'll be interesting. But again, I'm going to say, man, this blows up in everybody's faces, and I can already tell you at least Bill Murray is going to let people know that this movie was crap and they didn't like the idea. Because I mean, at the very least, like, he's being threatened to be sued. So I'm pretty sure if the movie bombs, he's not going to care if he's getting sued. He's going to come out and say it's crap.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I mean, considering that he wasn't very kind to Garfield in any particular way. I mean, if they decide to have another cameo of Bill Murray in another film where he gets killed, if it is bad, he'll probably just list that up. Ghostbusters reboot, maybe.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, final thoughts before we move on to the next story here. Which
I think we said it all. So
yeah. So this story. Go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. I guess just want to remind one more time. Go watch Midnight's Edge channel about the whole Ghostbusters this whole new reboot. Just go watch their channel about the whole behind the scenes drama of getting this movie made. It's pretty fascinating.
I love the fact that one of the people, we actually have a couple of comments going on right now, and one of them specifically is saying, wow, I'm getting sick and tired of this Ghostbusters drama, and I'm not a fan. So that says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on into the next story. And the next story, we actually covered, speaking of World War II days, way back in the day, we talked about a story where there was a possibility that Chris Hemsworth would be playing the what was it? The Pulp Fiction hero, Doc Savage.
Yep, the man of bronze himself.
Yes. So at that point, we covered that Chris Hemsworth was being considered for it, but he was promptly kind of taken out of consideration. And this week, we got the announcement, but we got it from a source that everybody kind of denied, and that was from Dwayne Johnson. So Dwayne Johnson came out and said, yes, he was. I believe he was officially offered the role of Doc Savage at that point, and announced on his Twitter, I think, is where it went, and obviously everybody took it with a grain of salt because, well, it's not the first time Dwayne Johnson's done stuff like this. I mean, he kind of hinted that he was going to be the Green Lantern John Stewart, and in turn became Black Adam. So a lot of people kind of went, no, that's not true. But the studio has since confirmed that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson will be playing Doc Savage. So this movie, they've been working on long since the Chris Hemsworth announcement. They've been trying to get this going, I think, at least a couple years before that.
Well, yeah, and people have been trying to make a Doc Savage movie for years, even way back in the 60s, because he's one of the classic Pulp Fiction heroes, right up there with the Shadow and the Spider. So it's very much been one of those characters that people throughout the history of Hollywood have been trying to bring to the silver screen, and it has not been easy because, well, to give some context, a lot of people may recall Superman, the Man of Steel, Clark Kent, and a lot of character traits that we see in Superman took inspiration from Doc Savage, such as the increased strength, the increased intelligence, so on and so forth. And so it's very much kind of like when they made the Phantom into a movie or the Shadow into a movie, because like, oh, well, these are pulp heroes that are classic that people have only a faint knowledge of. And with this, though, it might, I don't know, I'm a little bit more optimistic because it seems that at least this time that people actually are making this because they find the character interesting, whereas with the Phantom, they were just jumping on a bandwagon with all the other superhero films.
Well, and on top of that, like, you might have to clarify this for me because I'm not entirely familiar on Doc Savage, but he's more kind of an action hero superhero, isn't he?
He kind of is. Basically, the idea is that Doc Savage, he's not like Superman where he has superpowers. He's basically someone who was raised in a lab with a bunch of scientists, and basically his body has been trained to peak athletic condition, and his brain has been trained to peak mental condition, meaning that he's really intelligent and really, really like athletic and strong. So kind of like Captain America without the super soldier serum. He's just someone whose body is very conditioned, like is at the peak of athletic perfection, and his brain's also able to like process a lot of calculations and stuff like that. But the flaws he has is that since he was raised in such a controlled environment to basically create the perfect human being, he has no social skills. And that's kind of the main flaw with Doc Savage, that he's really smart, he's really fast, he's really strong, but he doesn't have social skills because he was basically raised in a laboratory his whole life.
So in essence, I mean, the casting of Dwayne Johnson is kind of ideal because, I mean, given the type of hero that this is supposed to be, well, Dwayne is toned enough, and most of the roles that Dwayne gets are action movie roles, so this is probably right up his alley to try and take on Doc Savage. I also found it interesting that it's, we may have covered this when we talked about Chris Hemsworth, but it's Shane Black, so the director of Iron Man 3, that is actually writing and directing this. And so already that's actually kind of hopeful as far as I'm concerned, because I do like Shane Black's work. So I at least think that it's in somewhat good hands.
Yeah, it's just very much the case that people, I mean, obviously people are going to be very wary of it because it's been an idea that has been stuck in, that has changed hands, has been stuck in development hell for so long, plus a lot of people are also wary of films based on pulp heroes because of the film versions of both The Shadow and The Phantom. But looking at who we've got here, I'm going to be cautiously optimistic, where it could go really wrong, but it could also turn out right, because at least here we're seeing a little bit of passion, some genuine interest in the character, and rather than a studio trying to basically take a name that people only kind of sort of know and just crap out a movie like that.
Yeah, and you're right. They could technically do that kind of thing. I'm at least happy that they took, because, I mean, we could have gotten another Shadow movie out of this. We really could have, and that wouldn't have been a good idea at all.
I mean, unless they gave it to all the right people and the stars aligned, but even then, The Shadow, that's a whole separate can of worms, where you have a character that is depicted one way on radio, but another way in the novels, and that's a whole other mess.
Yeah, exactly. So at least we know to some extent that this is going to be good. Obviously, we'll see when it actually does come out, but I'm at least more optimistic. It wasn't that I was against the Dwayne Johnson casting, but I was more along the lines of, okay, who's writing it, who's directing it, and whether or not they have a passion for Doc Savage. Alex, your thoughts on Dwayne Johnson being cast as Doc Savage?
I don't have any particular strong thoughts because I don't know anything about Doc Savage myself. It's just, again, the case of, we'll wait and see, but based on the description that Romney had mentioned, you know, very fit, very toned guy, then, yeah, I guess physically Dwayne Johnson's probably the right choice for this.
And I can already feel one of our fellow podcasting buddies reaching out from the ether and smacking us, because this means that Dwayne will again be missing wrestling dates, and he would really like to see him wrestling instead. So I'm sorry, dude. I'm sorry.
Wrestle alligators. I mean, watching Dwayne Johnson wrestle alligators on a movie screen, we all want to see that, I'd assume.
It's kind of hard to deny that. It's kind of hard. I'm trying to think, has he done it already? No, I don't think he has. So yeah, I want to see it now. Now that Romney's mentioned it, dang it, Romney, now I want to see him wrestle an alligator. I want to see him apply the people's elbow to an alligator.
I'd either want to see him wrestling an alligator or wrestling a gorilla or some sort of gorilla-alligator hybrid with the voice of Hulk Hogan.
Well, let me tell you something, brother. Let me tell you ask you this one simple question, brother. What you gonna do when these scaly 24-inch gorilla pythons go wild on you? Sorry, I had to do it.
Please do an elemental hit.
Ooh, yeah. Let's get into an elemental hit. Yeah. There you go. I'm working on my Randy Savage. So let's go ahead and move on to the next story. There really isn't much to add on this one. Congratulations, Dwayne. We look forward to seeing you as Doc Savage. I look forward to seeing you in... I still want to see you as Black Adam. I want to see that movie, for crying out loud. So let's go ahead and move on to the next story, which is kind of another kerfuffle. So we have additional details regarding the Full Metal Alchemist live-action movie. Now, people might be sitting there going, did you guys actually cover this? Yes, we did, but it got kind of encompassed in live-action Ghost in the Shell news that also happened that week. So, yes, there is a live-action Full Metal Alchemist movie coming out. Do we actually know the director yet, Alex? No, we do.
Yeah, Fumihiko Sori.
So this is basically going to be like Attack on Titan, the movie, where it's in Japan, and then I'm guessing it will get select theaters here. So we are going to be getting a Full Metal Alchemist live-action movie, and they've already made an interesting decision when it came to the character of Edward Elric. So if people have watched the series, Edward, at least around the time of the major events, is around 15 or 16, so a fairly young state alchemist. They have now decided that Ed's age in the movie will be increased to 20 instead of being 15 like it was in the manga. I looked everywhere for like specific reasoning that they wanted to increase his age aside from the usual PR stuff that we get from this kind of thing. You know, like we're trying to realize a true vision and things like that. But I couldn't really find like a legit reason to up him 5 years, especially since it's Japan. We can't necessarily justify that it's because they're trying to accommodate to U.S. standards or EU standards or whatever.
Well, it's pretty much just, it's the easiest answer, really, is that it's easier to cast an adult actor in that role if they're 20 as opposed to when they're 15, and you get into child labor laws, getting an actor young enough. And so it's not even really they're trying to realize certain visions, just because it's easier to cast a 20-year-old than it is a 15-year-old.
It really would. And if that was the reasoning that we were being given, I'd be fine with that, because that's a common sense reason. It's just, unfortunately, we haven't really gotten that as the official reasoning for it. We do also have like a full-on, or at least somewhat of a full-on cast. So like people have already... Alex was not the only one that submitted this. We did have a listener request wanting us to talk about the other casting that we got. For example, we have official castings for General Hakuro. We have Mace Hughes. We have Riza Hawkeye, Maria Ross, Gracia Hughes. So that tells me that the movie will actually go into the Mace Hughes storyline. Shao Tucker, Dr. Marco, Lust, Envy, Gluttony, and Father Cornello. So at least that tells me that we would get up to a certain point in the storyline.
Yeah, but at the same time, that I'm getting very much they're trying to cram too many villains into this film, trying to cover too much ground in a 2-hour movie. Because, I mean, you've got Shao Tucker, you've got Father Cornello. I mean, Father Cornello I could see maybe for a cold open because that was the first episode, and that could be a case of, okay, the movie just starts with them taking down Father Cornello. So then we get into Dr. Marco, and, I mean, yeah, Dr. Marco is where things start getting weird. For those of you who don't remember, he was the guy who was researching the Philosopher's Stone, and in the case of the first anime, that was like a good sizable amount into the series, and so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, oh boy, they're trying to bite off more than they could chew.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree, and I also kind of disagree, Romney, and the main reason I disagree is, like, yeah, you can make the argument that there are too many villains, but this is the world of Full Metal Alchemist, where everybody is potentially a villain.
Yeah,
because everybody is dealing with truckloads of gray.
Yeah, but I'm just meaning in terms of how the film could actually be structured, because if you want to provoke the outrage in an audience that we all felt during the Shao Tucker episode, that needs time to actually have, you need to introduce the characters in that arc properly and basically go through the necessary amount of build-up. But if you're going to do that, Father Cornello and Dr. Marco all in one movie, that's where I have a problem. I mean, maybe they will do a good job, but it's just a case of, are we going to have enough time to do all of the stories of all of these characters justice? And that's what worries me.
It just depends. Yeah, I'm kind of there with you. I mean, if this was like a 2-part movie where we knew we were going to get devoted Shao Tucker storyline and then we were going to go into Cornello, because that would kind of fit in that timeline. Because I think they deal with Tucker, and then the research for the Philosopher's Stone happens, and then they go see Father Cornello.
No,
so
Father Cornello was first, because they don't really learn about Dr. Marco until long after the whole Father Cornello thing, after the Shao Tucker incident. So yeah,
because technically in the timeline, Shao Tucker happens before that.
But I know that they encounter Father Cornello before they even meet Dr. Marco. I know that much, because Dr. Marco, at least in the case of the first anime series, he doesn't appear until like halfway through, and with the manga, he doesn't appear for quite some time until they start uncovering it.
That's right, because Dr. Marco is one of the cast. Oh yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, because he's the main guy they try looking for when it comes to the Philosopher's Stone, but that's also when they're looking over his notes, they realize, oh crap, you have to use real people to make this thing. And that's like a big, big reveal that you're trying to put into one movie.
Well, and I can already tell you another problem with this. You're bringing in Marco, but I'm looking through this article, and there is no official casting for Scar. And I believe that part of the whole Marco storyline was dealing with Scar as the, quote, serial killer.
Yeah, that's kind of what leads into them trying to find Dr. Marcos, because Scar is also looking for Dr. Marco to basically blow his brains out.
And before people start leaving comments to me about, oh my gosh, you guys are spoiling the storyline, and we want to have Alex review Full Metal, it's not happening, people. It's just not. Alex, are you going to review Full Metal Alchemist?
Maybe, but we'll get into that in a bit.
Why must you make things hard for me, Alex? Why must you make things hard?
Circumstances have changed. What can I say? That's why I said we'll get into it in a bit here.
Damn it!
Kind of segue into the next half of the story.
So,
well, it does answer the one question of, will there be a U.S. release for this live-action movie? We don't know. And this next story explains why.
Exactly, and so let's just go ahead and get into the next story here, which is also from Anime News Network. We have a bit of bad news because Funimation is going to be losing all of the rights that they have on Full Metal Alchemist as of July 31st this year. So at that point, Alex was able to find out that they had since lost the rights to Brotherhood. They were not distributing Brotherhood anymore, but they still had the rights to the 2003 Full Metal Alchemist and the two movies, Conqueror of Shambhala and, I can't remember the other. I think it was like something of Milos. Star of Milos? So at that point, they are going to lose the rights for all of this, which probably means that a live-action movie is going to be that much harder to bring to U.S. shores.
Mm-hmm.
So, now that we've gotten into it, Alex, why don't you go ahead and give us your thoughts that you've been carefully hiding?
Yeah, well, first of all, regarding the license lapsing, my theory, and a lot of people are sharing the same idea here, is, well, this is a case of Aniplex essentially revoking the license back so that they can, again, relicense it later, sooner or later, under their own subsidiary, Aniplex of America, which, frankly, is not the most encouraging idea because, well, Aniplex tends to charge a lot for their anime, and they still cling to the old Japan model of 4 episodes, usually 3 episodes a disc, and charging about $60 a disc for it, maybe a little more. Depends, especially, and they also love to put out the nifty little Blu-rays with all the bells and whistles just to keep driving the price up. Yeah, I don't like Aniplex of America. They really make me despise. And regarding that, Full Metal Alchemist has always been a show that, unfortunately, I just never got around to for circumstances, and I've explained this before in videos, but now that this is happening, I've always considered recently maybe finally going back and sitting down to Full Metal Alchemist, finally giving it the chance I feel like it should deserve to get. So with this now, in a panic, I hastily went out and bought myself both the original series and the Brotherhood series.
Yeah.
Also, you went better, Alex, because on one hand, you could have the idea could be that Aniplex USA is wanting to snap it up. My theory, given that the live-action film is being produced by Warner Brothers Japan, Warner Brothers may be trying to swoop in to get the rights to the franchise, so that way they can distribute the live-action movie here, but also try to basically weasel their way into basically having control of the entire franchise, since they're only barely starting to enter the anime market with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and are basically thinking, hey, we can make money off of this, so let's basically grab fans by the ball and make a lackluster DVD of Full Metal Alchemist and see if they buy it.
Yeah, I tend to fall on Romney's side on this one, because the whole Warner Brothers deal kind of concerns me. And Warner Brothers would not just stop at the live-action film. They would want the rights to everything FMA. And so at that point, I could totally see them trying to gain dominion over it, including like rights to be able to make a game and things like that. So that's unfortunately probably what's going to happen in this case. As much as I agree with some of the comments that we're getting here where, yeah, Aniplex probably wants it back so that they can overcharge. The But if Warner Brothers sweeps in, they're going to want to overcharge too. So it's not like this is going to help anime fans at all.
Nope.
If anything, this just basically tells me, well, I better watch the Brotherhood movie before I don't have the opportunity to watch it anymore. Don't give me that grin. It's been on my list.
Yeah, but
I have Conqueror of Shambhala.
Yeah, another thing to consider, though, is that Full Metal Alchemist doesn't have as much mileage as it did back when it was first coming out for a lot of fans. I mean, the series, there hasn't been a new entry in the franchise in years, aside from this upcoming live-action movie, and so it's probably a case that it may not even be in Funimation's best interest to renew the license for however much it costs, because if it goes, okay, well, there's not enough interest to warrant us doing it, so why bother?
Actually, the other thing, too, is that even its syndication is actually being a hindrance. I know that that Adult Swim will bring it back occasionally for their Toonami block, but it doesn't stay for very long. I mean, for crying out loud, Cowboy Bebop stays longer than anything, and that's a 90s anime. You'd think that Full Metal Alchemist would be able to do it, and no, it really doesn't. That series leaves a lot of the time. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Alex.
Yeah, I know you're thinking potentially along the lines that Funimation just simply doesn't have the interest. I've read this. Maybe I could be wrong, and I don't think I've actually confirmed it, that Funimation did actually attempt to renew the license, but Aniplex rejected it. So, but you're right. But that is interesting. I hadn't really thought about the idea of Warner Brothers themselves potentially looking into licensing this. I know they've made attempts in the past to license anime. I know they were initially considering on distributing Summer Wars themselves, but then Funimation just did it anyway.
Warner Brothers was?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it's also a Warner Brothers film, or Warner Brothers distribution.
Warner Brothers has a Japan office, because that was the same thing with the Death Note movies, because Warner Brothers Japan produced the Death Note movies, and it was a similar issue where they were debating whether or not to get the rights to the live-action Death Note movies, as also a way of trying to gear up to do a live-action American remake, but that fell through, and thus Funimation got the license. Because with the way the licensing agreements work, I know in the case of Dragon Ball Z, 20th Century Fox has first run. Like, if they wanted to snap up the rights to a movie that was released in Japan, they get first pick, and then they have to wait and then Funimation has to wait like a year before they can actually buy the rights, because they have to basically let 20th Century Fox say yay or nay. And it may be a similar arrangement with Warner Brothers Japan and Warner Brothers USA, where it says the case of, okay, well, since it's Warner Brothers Japan, Warner Brothers USA has rights of first perusal for a first certain amount of time before they can basically go to anybody else.
Yeah. I don't know. This whole situation is way more complicated than it needs to be.
It does.
It really is.
I mean, it still kind of concerns me. I know you guys more lean towards that maybe FMA has kind of ran its course and the steam is just not quite there. I don't know. I mean, still, I always feel like Fullmetal has always been one of Funimation's flagship franchises for their studio out there, down there, whatever. What am I saying? I don't know. But it always has felt like one of Funimation's flagships, like Dragon Ball Z.
It is definitely one that gets advertised a lot. I mean, I do know that Funimation tried to tote FMA merchandise for the longest time. So, but I mean, the same thing could be said of things like DBZ. Could be said of things like I'm trying to think of some other things under Funimation distribution that fall under that. Was Naruto at one point under it?
No, Naruto's Viz.
Yeah, Naruto's Viz. Of the Shonen Jump stuff, I know Funimation did Yu Yu Hakusho.
Yu Yu Hakusho, they tried to tote that a little bit, but they tried to tote that under DBZ hype.
Yeah, because the key thing is that with the early days of Funimation, they tried marketing a lot of their anime properties to teenagers, so that's why they've got a lot of shonen series, a lot of fighting-based series, because they figured, okay, well, that's where the market is, and that's also where a lot of the merchandising was. And then, as the various pickups emerged in the American anime industry as part of the anime boom, they basically had to make do with what they were able to get.
Yeah, I'm still trying to think of the one Funimation series that got a lot of advertisement aside from DBZ and FMA. I know that there's at least one other in there. Here's the irony is it'll come to me literally right after this podcast, but I kind of agree. I agree and disagree with what you're saying, though, Alex. Is that Yes, I do think FMA has kind of run its course because syndication hasn't necessarily been all that kind to it. Not to say that it's a bad story. I still think it's an awesome story. It's just one of those things where I don't think where Funimation's trying to get merchandising out of this, and there just isn't a whole lot of, quote, potential out of it. I know that they tried to do the video games way back in the day, and Square Enix actually even did them, but they didn't do well. So at that point, that's why I'm more along the lines of it might just be time for FMA. It's done its circulation. It's done its course here. And here's the thing, the live-action movie might just rejuvenate it. If it's a really good adaptation, it might just rejuvenate it. And then at that point, Aniplex would have the rights, and they'd be able to charge whatever they want, or Funimation might just step in and rescue it again.
Or even middle ground, Warner Bros. Might just say, hey, Funimation, we'll buy the dub from you, and we're just going to put it on our own DVDs that are poorly optimized, like they did with JoJo.
Yes. So, final thoughts before we move on into the next story, which is more of a discussion on... So, final thoughts on Full Metal Alchemist. Alex, when can we expect this review of Full Metal Alchemist?
That's gonna be a long while. That's all I can say.
No, it isn't, my friend.
Because it's gonna, I'm gonna have to if I'm gonna plow through 2 series, it's over 100 episodes.
Well, it's a good thing that you have a buddy here that has the DVDs.
Well, I'm getting them too. Like I just said that when all this came out, in a fit of panic, I raced out to buy
Alex's fans, help me out here. Help me out here. I've been demanding an FMA review from him for a while now. Help me out here. Help me out.
It'll come eventually. But it's gonna be a while because I got more. Because I'm probably gonna want to watch both series, and that's gonna be over 100 episodes, which I normally avoid. I normally avoid the really long runners, but
is it 100? Well, yeah. If you mix the 2 series together, then
if you combine them both, because Brotherhood's like, I don't know, about 60 episodes, a little more, give or take, but
it's longer. And then the 2003 one, I think, is like 35, 40, something like that. It's not that long, but I'll at least be interested in what you think of it. Romney, final thoughts on the Full Metal Alchemist live-action movie and Funimation losing the rights.
Well, for Funimation losing the rights, it's a shame because, sadly, a lot of anime distributors are thinking, oh, well, we want to sell our overinflated prices for our anime DVDs. I don't know why we're bothering with these American things, because, I mean, the most guilty party of this sort of bull crap is Bandai, with how they tried to basically get, it's like, oh, we'll just put English subtitles on Gundam Blu-rays, and then they can import them, because we're in the same region. Fans will pay that much money, and which is the case of Nope, which is why Right Stuff thankfully swooped in and rescued stuff and said, hey, we'll distribute it. And yeah, I mean, while this costs like $40, at least it's 26 episodes for $40 as opposed to 4 episodes for $40.
Dear Sunrise, this is a Gundam fan that has to pay way too much for his DVDs.
Yeah,
and he promised his fans that he would watch every single series. Are you really going to make me shed a tear?
Yeah, don't blame Sunrise. This is clearly Bandai, because Bandai is an awful company.
I'm blaming Bandai, too. Bandai has made this hard for me, especially when I have to go through routes that I don't necessarily want to go through for the series that have never even hit U.S. shores. So
yeah, well, that's how it is for fans of JoJo and fans of Star Blazers, because with Yamato 2199, they're pulling the same exact shtick.
Tell me about it. I still want you to finish your Star Blazer vlogs. The thought of more work right now for both Romney and Alex is not exactly a good prospect. I'm not going to divulge too much, but we've actually got a big project happening very soon, and unfortunately that did add to the workload of everybody here. So, again, no details, but yeah. The thought of adding anything onto these guys' workloads would probably get me killed. So that's why I got shunned for the Star Blazer vlogs.
Yeah. Speaking of things that are possibly getting killed, let's move on to the discussion.
So the discussion that we had is actually from last week. And unfortunately, we kind of ran out of time before we could even talk about it. So we actually just talked about another story instead. the story or the discussion is in regards to a couple of statements made by voice actress Megumi Hayashibara. Am I saying that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Hayashibara.
Probably.
For those of you who don't know, that would be the voice of Rey from Evangelion, Lena Inverse, and I'm gonna just
We're talking about the Japanese voice, right?
the
Yes.
Japanese voice for Lena, Rey, so many characters. I mean, the list. Is
Cowboy Bebop's Faye, we have Slayer's Lena, we have Pokemon's Musashi, otherwise known as Jessie, All-Purpose Cat Girl's Nuku Nuku. She's got quite a resume under her belt. I shouldn't have used the term under the belt, because then I went to NGE.
It always comes back to honor, doesn't it, Adam?
Yeah, just looking at the list of the filmography.
Keep in mind, Alex, I'm seeing you in 2 days. You really, really want to bring up Anno to me right now.
Yeah, because I mean, she's also done stuff for Dragon Ball Z, Detective Conan, Miko Takahashi's Anthology, Digiturret, Saber Marionette, Latina. Basically, she's one of the major veterans.
Yes.
That's the point we're making here.
And so in the interview that she recently did, she was basically asked on kind of the state of anime, the anime market as it stands right now. And to which she actually had some pretty, I don't want to say scathing remarks, but pretty honest remarks on the matter. Specifically that Hayashibara marks the 1990s as being a turning point for voice actors as well as for the series, mainly because there was, in her interpretation, a lot of ambition in the series that were trying to be created, like, say, Neon Genesis Evangelion, like Cowboy Bebop, like Slayers. And so at that point, to kind of sum up the comments, which I'm sure you'll get more in detail from Romney and Alex, is that she's thinking, or her thoughts are that the most recent series that have come out are missing out on that, quote, ambition. They're not as ambitious series. Voice actors are usually kind of like they are here to some extent. I mean, with obviously Funimation has its staple, Viz has its staple, and those usually are the guys that they will go to first. She's basically saying that in Japan, this is the exact same thing. When this kind of character is written, this kind of actress or actor is cast.
But at the same time, he also mentions how voice actors have also kind of become flavors of the month.
Yes.
Say, instead of casting a veteran voice actor for a character in a very highly anticipated anime, they'll basically cast either a member of an idol group or a famous singer or some sort of celebrity just to basically market that more so rather than casting someone who actually has the training and the talent, which is a problem more or less unique to Japan because of the way they view animation and voice acting in general, where the voice actors are becoming as much as part of the product as the anime itself.
But regardless of these comments, reaching out to the internet, all of these statements have sparked at least some level of debate in the fact that whether or not the 90s was the, quote, ambitious period, or whether or not this current era, and a lot of people have made some strong arguments that this current era is the ambitious period, because we're starting to see stories that go beyond the stereotypes of insert sci-fi anime here or insert fantasy anime here, and actually trying to do more immersive stories. One of the biggest examples that gets brought up is the saturation of the what's the genre? You love it, K-On! Is it?
Moe.
Not Moe, but the
Slice of life.
Slice of life. The slice of life genre is starting to make its way over here, and so at that point they're making arguments that this is being ambitious because it's bringing even more of kind of the tropes that are in Japan to U.S. shores, and they're doing well here. In specific, slice of life anime, moe anime, etc., etc. And so at that point, it's gone pretty 50-50, at least from what I've been able to read. So I actually just kind of want to open it up to the panel on whether or not you think that Hayashibara-san is right. It was 90s the era of ambition, and that's where a lot of our innovators or pioneers in anime are, or is it in this current era?
She has a point. You know, she really does, I think, have a point. I'm not going to say I 100% agree, but I haven't, seen the majority of 90s anime. But you do look at the amount of anime produced back in the late 90s compared to now, it's a huge ratio of shows. I mean, just in the last year alone, more than 100 shows have been produced. In the late 90s, it might have been somewhere in the 40s, 20s. The Anime Man actually made a video on this. He actually ran the numbers, crunched the numbers. I can't remember exactly. So, I think so. Certainly, there is the problem because anime is being cranked out at such a high rate for the sake of the business, for the sake of making profit. It is a business. It's what it comes to be. And so when you do that, unfortunately, you do get a little quality lost. I've had my complaints certainly with the decline of some studios have declined, and others have retreated, and others have fallen back on simply making what's safe. But I think it's just sort of, well, at the same time, all media is like this. Trends do come and go. You know, in the late 70s and early 80s, there was the boom of mecha anime thanks to Star Wars. In the late 90s especially, we had the boom of monster-styled collectathon shows thanks to Pokemon. So I think the industry is definitely saturated, and maybe has lost its ambition. So I guess I'm agreeing with her, but I think I'm not sure what I want to say here, but I'm so lost in my words. I don't know what the heck I'm saying anymore.
Well, let me actually go ahead and cut over, because Romney actually looked like he had a few things to say when I was making my statements here. So let's go ahead and give it over to you, Romney, really quick.
To kind of build on what Alex was mentioning, how kind of the loss of ambition, to kind of where I'm saying, I'm kind of in the Grant camp, because I think people are not necessarily saying that Hayashi Bada was saying that the 90s had the most ambition. She was just saying that that was a particularly ambitious time in anime.
Yeah.
When all things considered, things were getting kind of stagnant, but then you have crazy people like the people at Gainax, who were basically a bunch of renegade animators that came up from out of nowhere that more or less changed the dynamic, because with how Japanese businesses work, you have almost kind of like the more dynastic sort of approaches where people promote internally and people kind of conform to the old way of doing things, so then you suddenly have this independent studio come out of nowhere, make this really ambitious animated short for Daikon, and then suddenly they're just like, these guys are really skilled, and they're obviously not like conforming to any set thing, so it's very much the case. It's kind of like the Badlands of animation is kind of what it was, and there have been highs and lows throughout the history of anime where you had people kind of stuck in those ruts, but then you had people who were able to work within those ruts to actually like, tell really good stories, as was the case back in the 70s where you had basically a bunch of mecha anime that came out, but some people were able to use what they were limited to tell very engaging stories, like with Voltes 5, for example, a series that was so popular and actually had a very sweeping narrative that President Marcos of the Philippines was actually afraid of some of the messages it was conveying and tried to have it banned in the country, only to have it backfire. And
well, and also, I mean, like, you guys keep on bringing up that the 70s were kind of the era of the mecha anime. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because the 80s and the 90s also had their share of mecha as well. And I'm not just saying Gundam, but we had franchises that continued to evolve that particular genre. I mean, we had things like Gurren Lagann happening. We had Code Geass and Eureka 7 happening, as well as series like Rosathon. And even bringing back like older concepts like Mazinger Z into more modern aspects.
Yeah. But the thing to consider is that even back in the 70s, you had, well, renegade people who were wanting to challenge the status quo. I mean, in Japan, you had people like Go Nagai who, like, I mean, if you want to go all the way back to manga, you have Osamu Tezuka who says, hey, this is a very effective medium for storytelling. Let's use it for more than just kids' cartoons. Then you have Go Nagai saying, hey, we kind of like what these people have been doing. Let's see if we can push the boundaries even further. And then you have like various people in the 70s, and then you have Anno thinking the same thing, like, oh, well, anime's getting kind of stagnant. Let's see if we can push the envelope a little bit. And my theory is that we're kind of at that same period of lull where everybody's trying to be really safe, especially given that the anime industry is funded mostly by merchandising nowadays, whether it's Moe or something funded by toys like Gundam. It's very much a case of, okay, well, let's play it safe, make most of our money through the merch, or based on the brand, which is kind of why, despite Anno's intentions, I don't think the rebuild films are going to really influence the anime industry as much as the original Eva did, because it's a case of, oh, well, they're being made because it's such a a recognizable brand, it's not going to have the same impact that the original Eva had, because the original Eva was the out-of-nowhere hit that nobody expected. But now, Anno's trying to basically make the same magic twice, and even if they are really well animated, keep in mind I haven't seen them, but even if they are really well animated, you're not going to achieve the same effect, and that's kind of where we're finding ourselves, where you have people trying to do the same thing, trying to make lightning strike twice, but trying to basically do it while still being very safe and not taking as many risks. And that's kind of the problem we're seeing with the anime industry.
So it sounds to me like you're basically making the argument that the anime industry is very much the equivalent of Square Enix constantly praying to an altar of Cloud and Sephiroth.
Yeah, except this time they're praying to altars that have the RX-78, Eva Unit 1, whatever Moe pop star is popular at the time. They keep switching out the idol every so often. And a Pokeball, and...
No, Alex, Lacus Klein doesn't count.
That's pretty much the altar they have. It's the RX-78 Gundam, Eva Unit 1, Doraemon, Lupin, Conan, and a random pop idol statue that they keep switching out every single week when the blood gets all over it, and they basically have to switch it out.
Yeah, I mean, you both are making some legit points on the matter. I don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards Alex's opinion, where it's kind of hard to say like this era had the ambition and this one didn't, because like with TV here, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes you have a feeling like I personally think that the CW has things right now when they are the only ones making decent DC stories. And that's a majority of the superhero series that we're seeing on TV. But with anime, I mean, the 80s had hits and misses just as much as the 90s did, and just as much as the 70s did. And so at that point, it's really hard to say that one era had or lacked ambition. The ambition was different in every era. I don't know if I'm answering the question or not, but I mean, you guys are bringing up an interesting point where the 70s was entirely saturated with mecha anime, and the 90s were saturated with Demon Slayer anime. And that's entirely true, because at that point, that's what they thought that the market wanted. But at the same time, we also ended up in this whole concept of oversaturation made people not really want them anymore. And so at that point, you had really great series that were coming out from Hideaki Anno. Yes, there, I said it, Alex. I'm not going to deny that NGE wasn't a good mecha anime. It was.
It was. It is.
It just fell apart at the end.
Well, yeah, that's a whole fun story in itself, and and to Otto's credit, besides the fact he is rebuilding on Evangelion, no pun intended there, because rebuild, but he's also one of the co-sponsors of the Unanimator Expo, which they encourage animators to go out and make little shorts for this ongoing festival for Fuji. I think it's Fuji Television, yeah, and so it is just a matter of being able to find and nurture the new talent, hopefully to see the old start nurturing the new. I mean, we still have some old timers working in the industry heavily, like Mamoru Oshii, and then you have the ones who are in the sort of state of transition, like Hayao Miyazaki right now. He is retired from features, but he's still making shorts, but we don't really know what the future of Studio Ghibli is at this point. So it is, like we've said, ebbs and flows. So
yeah, I mean,
the ambition might be lost now, but it can always be regained.
To continue the thought that I was going for is, yeah, the as much as I can praise people like Anno and people like Tomino and Hajime Yatate, amongst many others, I could technically praise Masami Obari because, yes, 80% of his stuff is well porn, but he did have a couple of really good cheesy series in there somewhere. So at that point, it just depends on what is actually working at that given moment and whether or not it can evolve into the next era. For example, I still think, even though I'm horribly biased, Gundam has evolved properly throughout the years. Including this new era with Gundam Build Fighters, as well as being able to have a separate series that are like Iron-Blooded Orphans that is still doing well, still trying to tell those stories that Gundam would tell. But at the same time, we also have series like, well, I don't want to bring this up, Romney, but from what I'm reading, Dragon Ball Super isn't doing as well as we would like to hear.
Yeah, and that's a whole separate can of worms. But really, what I'm looking at the anime industry and kind of what's being popular, what I think really needs to happen is, well, somebody needs to look at the genre that is popular. And I'm not saying like subvert it for the sake of subverting it, but actually finding what makes it work and using that to subvert it, because that's what Ava did, where it looked at the common tropes of mecha anime and decided, okay, well, how can we use these tropes to tell a more creative story? Because the problem is that you have people trying to be subversive for the sake of subversive. I mean, after the release of Madoka Magica, you had a bunch of people like, oh, we're making a bunch of dark, edgy, magical girl series like Madoka Magica without understanding why Madoka Magica worked. It's the same case here in the U.S., where you have a film that does really well, everybody tries to copy it without actually understanding what made the film work. So
yeah, to add on that thought, it's really just the fact that people want to copy the formula. They don't necessarily want to recreate the formula. They just want to cash in on what was working at that given moment. But in some cases, like with Madoka, recreating that or creating that formula originally is kind of the way to go. That's how you get concepts like Space Dandy. That's how you get concepts like Madoka Magica. That's how you get runaway hits like Full Metal Alchemist. I mean, that's how they happen. Ghost in the Shell, same kind of example, is that sometimes it's not necessarily that you need to just recreate the formula, it's that you need to be the guy designing the formula for it to actually be able to work. So we actually are almost running out of time, so final thoughts that we have on this topic, and obviously I'm going to open this up to the listeners. If you have any other thoughts on this, we would definitely like to hear from you guys also. Whether or not you think that, like, is she right that there are just some eras that actually have that ambition and some that don't, or whether or not it's different each time. So final thoughts before we start wrapping things up.
I think we've said it all. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, all I can say is this is not a topic that anybody will be able to find the answer to instantly, because there's just a lot of factors to consider, especially given how expensive the anime industry. I mean, animation in and of itself is a very hard medium. That's why Mamoru Oshii is no longer doing animated films, because, as he's put it, the kind of people that used to do the kind of work that he needs for his films aren't there anymore, because animation is going in a different direction, embracing like digital forms of animation and trying to basically cut corners wherever they can. Whereas if you want something that requires that meticulous attention to detail that we got with things like Ghost in the Shell, and you're just not getting it, then that's pretty much, because that was the same that Oshii came out with, saying like, that's why I don't do anime anymore, because there aren't people who are willing to put in that time and effort to pay attention to that detail, since the anime industry is all about having something to show on the broadcast and fixing it for the Blu-ray. And so this is just part of a much larger problem that we're not going to find the answers to anytime soon. It's very much like any industry. It's not going to be fixed overnight.
And here's the thing, given the argument that you're giving, this is not just necessarily an anime problem. I mean, this is one thing that we brought up on the podcast numerous times. U.S. has emigrated towards CG animation, and we've all basically said, like, we would really kill for a 2D animated movie that came out of somebody like Disney or Pixar or to that extent, but it is a costly process to be able to do that compared to doing things digitally. That's why in some cases, like I've noticed that some people have been complaining about the, quote, crappy CGI that's starting to show its way into anime. It's cheaper to be able to do that, and so that's why they try to do that cutting of the corner instead of doing it all entirely based on cell animation. So that's just the sad part of it.
Yeah, especially when you consider that a lot of animators working on these shows are freelancers. None of them are really in-house. And so, yeah, it's a sticky wicket.
All right. Final thoughts, Alex?
Well, I guess my final thoughts is, well, once again, it's just sort of there are elements of, God, sorry, her name, Harubayashi-san. There are elements of what she is saying I definitely can agree with, and I can understand her point of view. There definitely is the issue, especially when you are casting flavor of the month. I do see so often just the latest AK whatever idol is being cast in this role, and so on and so forth. So she's definitely got some points there that there hasn't been that long-term work for many seiyus and voice actors in Japan. But at the same time, I think to say any one decade is better or golden age, we always say there's a golden age of any kind of medium, but a lot of that is really just the nostalgia filters turn on, and I mean, there are people I've
It's
seen
easy.
people argue.
It's easy to look at things through rose-colored glasses.
It really is. I mean, I've seen people argue, the mid 2000s was really the early to mid 2000s was really a good time for anime, and yeah, because we got so many really amazing projects out of that time. We got the original Full Metal Alchemist, we got Cowboy Bebop, Trigun to a lesser extent because that's like really late 90s, but right, and we got Big O, but for all those really great shows, well, there are still a lot of misses in that same span of time. So it just you gotta look for the real good shows. It's like I don't like the whole 99% of everything is crap quote, but sometimes that is kind of what you gotta do. You gotta look through what's not so good. You gotta find the gems and embrace the gems, celebrate them, and really raise them up.
But to expand on what you're saying, you got to find the gems that are for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the unique thing there. I mean, for example, like just looking for the gems. Well, Alex, how many mainstream anime do you have on your shelf right now? Because like if you just keep it to we have to look for the gems, that would obviously create a problem with you. That would create a problem with me too. There's a lot of mainstream anime that I just don't watch. Yeah. So. At that point, it really is just finding the gems that are unique to you, that work for you.
Yeah, it's just like I do have the tendencies to lean into slice of life shows. That's why I enjoyed K-On! I know a lot of people say K-On! Is the reason the industry is in the state right now. Moe is the bane, and it's killing the industry. But I look at a show like K-On! I don't just see cute girls in Moe. I do see a really sweet coming-of-age story about a bunch of friends who are in a club together and they enjoy each other's company, and that's the whole point.
As much as we knock you about the female protagonist, if you actually had a slice of life based around a guy, like say Angel Beats, you would have no problem with that.
Yeah, I really wouldn't. It's just give me an interesting character with an interesting story, male or female, I'll watch it.
So, all right, well, let's go ahead and wrap things up. It has definitely been an interesting evening, to say the least. But thankfully, hopefully, we may have left you with at least something to consider, especially our fellow anime fans, because we like hearing from you guys. And again, join in on this discussion. We would definitely love to hear from you guys. And this time, I promise, I will make sure that the panelists actually go to the comments to make answers, not necessarily to our private thread on making those answers. So let's go ahead and wrap things up. If people want to get a hold of us and give opinions on whether or not they think we were right or wrong on a given story, Alex, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, you can always find me here on YouTube. ShadowBlazer3000 is my channel. And of course, I have the backup secondary channel, ShadowBlazer3000X2. I should probably check that and see if any new activities come up there. Just comments. I haven't really posted anything there lately because my videos have been coming in under 15 at least. But that's where you can reach me here, ShadowBlazer3000 or ShadowBlazer3000X2. And you can always find me on Twitter at AlexJShort.
All right. Romney, how do people get a hold of you if they wish to leave comments on your opinions?
Well, you can always find me here on YouTube at youtube.com/StudioGhostUtah. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Romney'sReviews, no apostrophe. And I am also on Twitter at RomneyReviews. And as for my recommendation this week for Romney's Reading Club, I'm recommending Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Pink from Boom Comics, because it's actually one of the few stories I've actually been wanting to see from this new line where, well, the premise of Power Rangers Pink is that Kimberly has since left the team, but she's called back into action because she's the only one able to respond to a certain crisis, and thus has to don the powers of the Pink Ranger once again. And it's been a very interesting start, because unlike the other Power Rangers comics where they have the storylines divided between the main series and then that weird Bulk and Soul comedy series, this one is very straightforward. Oh, she's actually been living her own life and has been dealing with the issues of her having left the team. My guess is meaning that it's taking place after she's already filled out the Dear John, or maybe in explaining why she sent Tommy the Dear John. But it's been a very good read. I'm looking forward to reading the rest of this miniseries, because this is one of the stories that I've been hoping that these comics would fill, is, well, what happened to some of these Rangers after they left the team?
All right. And if people want to get a hold of me, there are two really good ways to do so. One of which you can see on my lower third, at least you can see, is on my Twitter at Drac2326. That's where you can reach me and leave your suggestions on my thoughts on the stories that we did cover, whether or not you think I'm right or wrong. You're more than welcome to share your opinion. I just can't guarantee that I'm going to agree with it. The other way is on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Drac2326. That is where Geek News is hosted, so you can see the full-on archive of all of the episodes that we've done live. And we'll go into the other details in a second. The other one I want to get into also is Aldo, because unfortunately Aldo was not able to join us the rest of the night. He had some construction issues that basically cut off his power. So at that point, our hearts go out to him. If you want to reach him, there are two great ways to do it. One is check out his YouTube channel, which is Board Offline. He does game reviews. He does his own podcast. He does a myriad of other content that you guys can come and enjoy. And you can also go to his Twitter, which is at it's at Board Thresh now. And you can leave your opinions on what he thought about all the porn, or maybe even bring him into this anime discussion, because he's just as much an anime fan as Alex. If anything, he can bring Ano back into the discussion. Dang it, why do we keep on bringing up Ano? I'm seeing you on Monday. You better not be giggling. All right. And also, one of the other things that I do want to advertise, especially on my YouTube channel, is check out all the various other content that I have on that channel. I not only do game reviews, which I just barely put up a review for Battleborn. I've got plenty of summer plans, and a lot of it is involving the Geek News crew. So people are already beginning to see the Let's Play that me and Brinton got together to do of Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition. I can already tell you Alex's Let's Play began, and the footage is being edited. It just isn't up yet, and I have a feeling you guys will like that. And we also do, and to the people who thought we didn't have anything planned for Aldo or for Romney, you are full of crap, unfortunately, because yes, we do. We just haven't, unfortunately, been able to begin that just yet. But it is happening. I can guarantee you that. And so there's plenty of other things in store. We will have us getting together to do Gaming with Geeks. We are getting together for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows. Unfortunately, Alex actually had to see it today because he's not going to be able to join us at the theater. But next week, we actually aren't going to have too many stories to talk about. We're going to be talking about our review of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, along with our E3 predictions, because literally the next day the E3 conferences will begin. So if you guys want to continue to follow the show, you like what we had to say, you disliked it, here are the ways to be able to get a hold of us. The first two are social networking, and they are our Facebook and Twitter. So if you look up Geek News Reviews and Opinions on Facebook and like it, you'll get up-to-the-minute information when we're going live, the discussions that we'll be having, things like that. And you can also follow our Twitter at GeekyNRO, and you'll get the exact same information from there. You could also contact us via email at geekyweek@gmail.com. You can leave story suggestions. We have plenty this week and the week before that were actual listener suggestions along with panelist suggestions. We do utilize them. In fact, the silly story that people liked from last week, the one with the snake getting into the console, that was a listener suggestion, people. So we do actually bring those into the fold when we can make them work. Finally, if you want to get an RSS feed of Geek News Reviews and Opinions, you can go to our Podomatic page, which is geekyweek.podomatic.com, and you'll get up-to-the-minute information when our archive is updated. I know that the archive is a little out of date right now, but I am working my butt off to get it back up to date and to get the most current episodes up so that you guys can appreciate that. But along with that, on the Podomatic page, you can subscribe to iTunes and get those feeds directly. So I would recommend wholeheartedly that you guys do that if you wish to support the podcast, or if you just like listening to 4 to 5 geeks just ramble on. But that's going to go ahead and do it for us this evening. We hope you guys have enjoyed. We continue to love you guys' contributions, whether it be comments, whether it be the stories, whether it be whatever it's going to be. And in the meantime, for me, for Alex, and for Omni, and also for Aldo, we will see you guys next week for even more geek news, reviews, and opinions. It's not working? Okay.